Things just aren't working out. We just need a little faster pace here. Hope you understand that.
No, but okay.
Something about this season of Gold Rush felt different right from the start. The gold totals were lower, the tension was heavier, and the smiles felt forced. Longtime fans could sense it immediately. What looked like just another tough mining year was actually one of the most chaotic and emotionally draining seasons the show has ever had, and most of it never made it to air. Behind the scenes, pressure was building from every direction. Rising fuel costs, tighter deadlines, and shrinking profit margins turned every decision into a gamble. Crews weren't just fighting the ground anymore, they were fighting time, money, and each other. And once that pressure hit a breaking point, things spiraled fast. Mining has always been brutal, but this season crossed a line. Several crews were pushed to operate longer hours with less room for error. Equipment failures that used to be setbacks suddenly became disasters. A single broken wash plant could mean losing tens of thousands in a matter of days. That kind of stress doesn't just stay at the worksite, it follows people back to camp, into conversations, and straight into conflicts that cameras only partially captured. Tensions between key players started boiling over early. What viewers saw as heated disagreements were actually the toned-down versions of far worse blow-ups. Shouting matches reportedly escalated into full-on confrontations that production crews had to step in to calm down. Long-standing partnerships were tested in ways they never had been before, and trust started cracking under the weight of constant losses. And it wasn't just the bosses feeling it. Crew members were caught in the middle, forced to choose between loyalty and self-preservation. Several miners quietly walked away mid-season, leaving without dramatic exits or on-camera explanations. To viewers, it looked like normal crew rotation. In reality, some of those exits were fueled by exhaustion, safety concerns, and frustration over promises that weren't being kept. Money made everything worse. While the show highlighted gold totals and dramatic weigh-ins, it rarely showed how thin the margins actually were. After expenses, some crews were barely breaking even, and a few were operating at a loss. That financial reality turned every argument into something personal. When your entire season depends on one good cut of ground, mistakes stop being forgivable. The mental toll became impossible to ignore. Miners who were once known for their calm leadership started snapping under pressure. Sleep deprivation, isolation, and non-stop filming added fuel to an already volatile environment. There were moments when arguments stopped being about gold entirely and became about respect, control, and survival. What made things even more complicated was the presence of cameras. Several cast members reportedly felt trapped between being authentic and protecting their image. Admitting fear, doubt, or burnout didn't fit the tough miner persona the show had built over years. So instead, those emotions came out sideways, through anger, stubborn decisions, and risky calls that only made things worse. Discovery played its own role in shaping what viewers saw. Storylines were tightened, timelines compressed, and certain conflicts softened to keep the narrative moving. But by doing that, the network also hid just how close some operations came to total collapse. The reality was messier, darker, and far more uncertain than the final edits suggested. There were also financial conversations that never aired. Deals with landowners, unexpected royalty increases, and last-minute equipment rentals drained budgets faster than gold could replace them. For some crews, the season ended with more questions than answers, and debts that followed them home long after the cameras stopped rolling. By the time the season wrapped, relationships had changed. Some partnerships would never fully recover. Others continued, but with a level of tension that hadn't existed before. Trust had been tested in ways that don't reset just because a new season starts filming. This wasn't just another tough year in the Klondike, it was a turning point. A season that exposed how fragile even the most experienced miners can be when pressure stacks too high. Gold Rush has always been about risk, but this time, the biggest danger wasn't underground. It was what the grind was doing to the people chasing it. And as fans look ahead to future seasons, one thing is clear. After everything that happened behind the scenes, Gold Rush may never feel the same again. What made this season even more unsettling was how close several crews came to walking away entirely. At multiple points, operations were hanging by a thread, not because of bad ground, but because morale had collapsed. When miners stop believing the season can be salvaged, productivity drops fast, decisions get rushed, corners get cut, and that's when things turn dangerous. There were reported safety scares that never became full storylines, equipment operating beyond recommended limits, crews pushing machines longer than they should have just to avoid another shutdown. In previous seasons, downtime was frustrating but manageable. This time, downtime felt like failure. Every pause reminded crews how little margin they had left. Several veterans privately questioned whether the grind was still worth it. These were people who had survived brutal winters, massive floods, and mechanical disasters in past seasons. Yet this year felt heavier, not because the work was harder, but because the reward felt more uncertain than ever. Gold totals didn't carry the same excitement when expenses swallowed most of the profit. And then there was the isolation. Filming schedules tightened, leaving crews with fewer breaks and less contact with family. For miners already running on empty, that isolation amplified every frustration. Small disagreements escalated quickly. Jokes turned into insults. And trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild in an environment where everyone depended on each other to stay safe. Some crew members reportedly felt they were being pushed to perform their stress rather than resolve it. When tensions rose, cameras stayed close, but real conversations, the ones that might have diffused situations, were often delayed or avoided altogether. That created a strange dynamic where conflict simmered longer than it should have, just waiting for the next trigger. Financial anxiety also followed crews back home. For many miners, Gold Rush isn't just a TV show, it's their livelihood. A bad season doesn't end when filming stops. Bills keep coming. Loans still need to be paid, and for a few crews, the off-season was spent scrambling to recover from losses rather than planning the next comeback. Viewers noticed the shift even if they couldn't name it. The weigh-ins felt quieter. Celebrations were shorter. Even big gold numbers lacked the usual sense of victory. That wasn't editing, it was exhaustion. When success comes at the cost of burnout, it stops feeling like success at all. There were also behind-the-scenes disagreements over future plans. Some miners wanted to scale back, reduce risk, and play it safer next season. Others felt the only option was to double down and go bigger. Those opposing mindsets created friction that carried through the entire season, shaping decisions in subtle but important ways. What rarely gets talked about is how reputation plays into all of this. Being on Gold Rush brings exposure, but it also locks miners into public expectations. Admitting a season went wrong can feel like admitting weakness, so instead of openly addressing problems, some crews tried to power through them, even when that made things worse. By the final weeks of filming, the mood had shifted from competitive to survival-focused. Crews weren't chasing record gold anymore. They were trying to finish the season without losing more money, more people, or more trust. That shift changed everything, including how miners interacted with production and with each other. Looking back, this season stands out not because of one dramatic moment, but because of everything that quietly piled up. The stress, the fatigue, the unresolved conflicts. Gold Rush has always shown struggle, but rarely has it shown what happens when the struggle stops being motivating and starts being draining. And that's why this season lingers with fans. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't triumphant. It was raw, uncomfortable, and real in a way the show usually avoids. The cracks didn't explode, they spread. As future seasons move forward, the question isn't just who will strike gold next, it's who's willing to keep paying the personal cost. Because after what happened this year, one thing is clear: the hardest battles on Gold Rush aren't always fought in the ground. They're fought within the crews themselves. Another uncomfortable truth from this season was how close some miners came to burning bridges they'd spent years building. When pressure is constant, patience disappears. Long-term friendships were tested not by one big argument, but by dozens of small moments that never fully cooled off. Missed deadlines, questioned decisions, a growing sense that everyone was watching everyone else. Several cast members reportedly became far more guarded on camera. Instead of open conversations, there was silence, short answers, avoidance. That kind of emotional shutdown doesn't make for dramatic television, but it says everything about how tense the environment had become. When miners stop talking, it usually means trust has already taken a hit. There was also quiet resentment toward the expectations attached to the show itself. Gold Rush built its reputation on big risks and bigger payoffs, but reality doesn't always cooperate. Some miners felt trapped between doing what made sense operationally and doing what looked exciting on screen. Playing it safe might protect the crew, but it doesn't always fit the story audiences expect. That pressure showed up in decision-making. Riskier cuts of ground were taken when caution might have been wiser. Expensive fixes were delayed longer than they should have been. In mining, those choices compound fast. One gamble leads to another, and before anyone realizes it, the season is spiraling. A few crews also struggled with leadership fatigue. Being the one who makes every call, absorbs every mistake, and carries the blame wears people down. Leaders who once thrived under pressure began second-guessing themselves. That uncertainty trickled down, affecting morale across entire operations. Meanwhile, comparisons between crews intensified. Seeing another team succeed while your own numbers lag can be brutal. It creates frustration, envy, and doubt, especially when everyone knows the cameras will highlight the contrast. Instead of friendly competition, it started feeling personal. Off-camera conversations grew heavier too. Talks about stepping away for good, about whether another season was even worth attempting. For some, the dream that originally brought them to Gold Rush had shifted into something closer to obligation. Walking away felt risky, but staying felt draining. What makes all of this harder is that mining doesn't offer instant closure. You don't always know if a season was a failure until months later when finances settle and emotions catch up. That delayed impact means some of the real fallout from this season hasn't even fully surfaced yet. Viewers may eventually notice it in subtle ways: different attitudes next season, changed partnerships, a quieter confidence, or a noticeable lack of one. Gold Rush has a long memory, and the effects of one bad season tend to ripple forward. In many ways, this season exposed the human limit of endurance, not physical strength but emotional resilience, how long people can operate under uncertainty before it starts reshaping who they are. The show has always celebrated toughness, but toughness doesn't mean invulnerability, and that's the part that sticks. Not the gold totals, not the machines, but the realization that even the most experienced miners aren't immune to burnout. When pressure becomes the constant rather than the challenge, something has to give. As the dust settles, one question hangs over everything. Did this season break something permanently, or was it the wake-up call Gold Rush needed before pushing even further? Because if the show keeps escalating without addressing the cost, the next breaking point may not be so quiet.